we're here for another Archons Corner. This week we are Wookiee free, Twitter questionable, but we do have Ewok Jr.,
Hello, Keyforge community. Glad to be with you this evening.
Razcor,
Hey guys, how's it going?
and special guest Mason.
Hi.
And with that, I'm going to dump it on Ewok and go take care of.
All right. So, Keyforge community, we have our very own game designer here. Mason, we're so happy that you can go ahead and join us this evening. If you haven't seen lately, if you haven't paid attention, Mason Leto, you're kind of become famous here because you've made your own Keyforge adventure. So congratulations, first of all. If you have not checked it out, please check. I think it's on Facebook. I've seen it on... go ahead and tell us, where have you pushed it all? I know I've seen it on Facebook, Mason.
Yeah, I've posted on Facebook a couple times. A couple other people have posted content related to the adventure too. There's a post on Reddit. I'll be sure to link it in the Discord here too.
Yep. And we'll go ahead and knock for Wookiee there. Will be joining us hopefully a little bit later. Got a little delayed at work. We'll try and link it in the show notes, or it won't ever get linked in the show notes. Yeah, that's kind of the running joke. But Mason, your Keyforge adventure is Flight of the Royal Fortune. So before we get into that, tell us a little bit about yourself. How'd you get into Keyforge? Where did you start?
I got started in Keyforge when AOA was already out. My buddy picked up the starter set, and me and him were trying a bunch of different games at the time. And he convinced me to try playing Keyforge, and I was immediately hooked. After we played that evening, I went out and got 2 decks right away, and then pretty much ever since I've been playing. I'm relatively new to card games. Keyforge was the first in-person physical card game that I've played. But yeah, the genre is just incredible, and Keyforge, obviously the unique deck aspect is really special. And I don't know, I've been at times more competitively minded. Obviously I like trying to make things a lot too, so I've experimented with making content on YouTube a couple times, and most recently with making this fan-made adventure.
Cool. I'm going to go ahead and say that, we're always looking for more content creators. So the community is great and very supportive of one another. So if there's any further interest in that, the talent that I see from the Keyforge Adventures, I could see that you do very, very well to bring any content forward. Tell us a little bit about, said you're a little bit more of a competitive player. So, where do you typically play Keyforge? Is that at home? Is that in a play group? Where would you go ahead? Where could we run into you in the wild?
Well, for a while I was playing locally, doing chain bounds and stuff. Since the pandemic hit, though, that's fallen off. My local store doesn't support Keyforge anymore here in Duluth, which is a shame. But I've had the opportunity to play some larger prime events in the cities in Minneapolis and St. Paul in the past. Before the pandemic hit, that was a lot of fun. And then most recently at Keyforge Live, that was extremely fun. That was some of the most fun Keyforge I've ever played. Other than that, just playing on the Crucible. I'm sure if you play on the Crucible, you've probably ran into me. I'm no Sam on there. Usually I'm playing pretty lower SAS decks, I'd say, or mid to low SAS decks. I just like the ones that are sleepers. They tend to maybe not look that impressive at first, but I like decks that are very coherent and seem to do one thing. But yeah, I love playing Keyforge way too much.
Well, so to pique my interest a little bit there. So we say coherent, we'll really try to do one thing. Like, what do you look for? Do you look for certain cards? Do you look for, I just want something that has at least 20 Ember Pips on it? Like, what are you looking for? Curious.
So I'm a big believer in playing all my decks. So that's how I discover most of my decks. And then, of course, as you play and you see some cool combos, then, I find myself on DOK, looking up decks, seeing what's for sale, and trying to find like decks that are very cheap but do something really cool.
Mhm.
So
Yeah.
as far as specific combos, I don't know. I've looked at literally everything. I probably don't want to get into all of the specifics.
Oh, don't worry. I think you're in very good company here with both Drascore and myself going down that rabbit hole many a times. I know that I'm probably getting an evil stare from the back of my beautiful wife as to the amount of time that I've spent on DOK. I'm
Right.
looking at random decks, or she's shaking her head vigorously over in the side. I know that my daughter, as we were trying to get into story time tonight, was like, "Dad, can you please put down that the phone that you're looking at the deck so that we can actually read?" I was waiting for her previous to that, but yes, we all go down those holes, or at least the three of us, I could say.
Yeah.
But you saying your daughter wasn't like, tell me about a 70 sass one tonight for my bedtime story, Dad?
We did
No.
not get into that, but she did
No?
have her. She did. I will say this, Mason. When we were actually looking at your Keyforge adventure over the weekend, she was one that had come up to me. "Hey, Dad, can I go ahead and play?" And she was really excited. So in the future, I can definitely see being able to play with her and being able to pull it out. So that was really neat to be able to see. And I'll say, I actually got a chance to meet you at Keyforge Live, which was really cool. And you had a version of the Flight of the Royal Fortune there. And so it was really neat to see the work that you had put in beforehand, and then even to see the progress that has happened to be able to get to this spot now. So speaking of that, let's talk a little bit about Keyforge Adventures. If you're joining this cast, if you're new, if you haven't heard of Keyforge Adventures before, I'm fairly certain early 2021 is when FFG on their website had released 2 different cooperative versions. So typically Keyforge is played 2 different individuals sitting across the table. And the goal is to be able to forge 3 keys, the quickest, kind of that race component. However, Keyforge Adventures, as we are in a pandemic at the time, if you're hearing this in the future, hopefully it is finished, they have different objectives or goals. And I think that's something that really kind of grabbed my attention as I saw the early 2 Keyforge adventures that came from FFG. So if you're still interested, I would definitely check out. And the first one was Rise of the Key Racken. And then FFG also put out the Abysmal Conspiracy.
Abyssal.
Abyssal. Sorry, Abyssal. Yes.
Maybe it was Abysmal.
No.
Who knows?
No, it was not Abysmal. It is Abyssal.
Okay.
But for Mason and for Drascore, have you gotten a chance to play either of the FFG Keyforge Adventures?
I've definitely played Rise of the Kirakan. In fact, I have the Aegis. Is that the name of the company? That
Yep.
You can print on demand. I have the Aegis copy behind me here.
And since you're talking about that, I'm going to throw in a little piece because on Facebook, I just saw that Mason Aegis has actually worked with you, and they're printing kind of published copies of your version, which is Flight of the Royal Fortune.
Yep.
Is that correct?
Yep, they just became available.
Yeah, so that was really, really cool. I think that was just even yesterday or the day before. So check that out because they do some amazing, amazing work. It's beautiful. It looks like a standard deck that you're getting from FFG. I will say mine did not turn out as well, but I did color print them and they are laminated, and so they'll last and they work just as well too, which is a really nice component for Keyforge Adventures. And Keyforge Adventures are all free. So FFG, another huge props. During the pandemic, they did not look to cash in. I think there's a lot of people who would enjoy a very polished copy, but they produced all of this for us free of charge. And Mason, again, now having put this together, how much time has been put into it.
Right.
But have you gotten a chance to play either of the Keyforge Adventures?
Yeah, so when the Keyracken adventure came out, I played it immediately. I think I played it the first day it came out. I was really excited about it. And I'm typically not a solo gamer either. But I just love Keyforge so much that I wanted to try it. So I printed it off and then I played it, and I was just really impressed with kind of like you said, the alternate win condition. I think that was what really drew me to it. And then my mind started immediately spinning about the possibilities and how this expands the design space for Keyforge. So the very next day, I worked for like 16 hours straight. I was just completely hooked on coming up with my own adventure. I'm just the type of person where I get like really fixed on something and then I have trouble putting it down. So I wasted a lot of time. I shouldn't say wasted, but I spent a lot of time working on Flight of the Royal Fortune immediately after that. So yeah, and that was a long time ago, and it still took me over 6 months to finish the adventure.
Yeah, so there are a couple different questions there. So right away, if I'm correct, I mean, Rise of the Keyraken was in like March, if I'm correct, of 2021. And so now with us being in December of 2021, I mean, that's a significant period of time that you have gone ahead and put in. Even the 16 hours initially, it's interesting to see different game designers or how you get that initial thought. Did it pop out that you're like, hey, I want to go ahead and make my own adventure? Or like what, you're just super excited about Rise of the Keyraken that you decided to tackle this task? What kind of inspired you to start?
So I've always been, well, I shouldn't say always, but over the past, 6 years, I've been really interested in game design. So I've been putting together little prototypes and, typically for board games, not card games. Like I said, I'm still, relatively new to card games. I played a lot more board games in my life. So anyway, I've over the years have made my friends play a lot of my really crappy versions of board games, and they've suffered through it. And I've learned a lot over those years, but I had never actually finished a project. So I'd always, work on something for a couple months and then get excited about a different idea and then work on that. And yeah, game design, it's a very difficult thing, especially if you're on your own doing it. But anyway, I've learned a lot over the years about kind of the process and rapidly prototyping and being comfortable with changing things. So Keyforge being already a fully designed game, and then seeing kind of how they tackled this first adventure with the Keyraken, it really laid the groundwork and made it way easier for me to eventually reach a finished product. So it was way easier designing an expansion for a game than it is to design from the ground up. But yeah, the Keyraken was really exciting to me. Like I said, the expanding design space was really cool.
So talk to us a little bit about your process. You shared that it took 6 months. You shared that it was a little bit easier to go ahead and you had some previous attempts at this for game design. Have you looked at like where did you actually begin so that you were able to add on with your own Keyforge adventure? Did you pick out the theme right away? Did you go with some of the key mechanics, or where did you go ahead and start?
So, well, first of all, where the game is now is the theme is that there's a pirate ship that has stolen a bunch of dark amber, which was the cool new plot device introduced in Mass Mutations, the dark amber, and its interaction with mutant creatures. So this all these pirates, many of which are mutants, have stolen all this dark amber and they're trying to escape with it. So players are tasked with trying to prevent them from getting away and get all the dark amber back, basically. So when I initially started thinking about designing my own adventure, I hit on the dark amber theme pretty quick because it was before Mass Mutation was released. I think a lot of people were wondering like, oh, is dark amber going to be a new mechanism? And then it ended up being more of a thematic thing. So I always thought it would be cool to actually have that mechanism. So I started thinking about dark amber and how it could be implemented as an actual game device. And then, like I said about the alternate win conditions, what was cool about the Keyraken was that you didn't win by forging your own keys. So obviously, I wanted to do something similar where it's a departure from a typical game of Keyforge. So I thought it would be cool to, instead of get amber to win the game, you have to make the enemy lose amber in order to win the game. So that's how the game. I came up with those ideas pretty quickly, and that's been the core idea behind the game since the beginning. And I've designed around that and try to keep that pirate theme and the theme of them trying to escape. And that's been kind of the guiding principle behind it.
I think the theme as a whole fits extremely well in the Keyforge universe. I mean, we already have Shadows as a whole house that just wants to steal. And then we also can go ahead and see from our anomalies, this idea of space pirates. So I think that pirates as a whole, just it fits in so well. And that's what came across as I was going ahead and reading the rules and then being able to see it. It seems very seamless. So I got to give you a big round of applause, kind of the steam ovation there, because you can see you took your time, you really thought about it. But then the goal being you got to be able to steal all of the amber from these pirates who are trying to get away. I think the win con for the pirates also really, really fits. And so it's both thematically appropriate, but also I hate to say this, but when I was playing Rise of the Keyraken, it almost felt a little bit easier. I mean, Sheep and I had played our first time. We had cracked 2 random decks that we opened up with and just tried. But here, this seemed to go ahead and provide a bigger, you can lose, honestly, on any single turn. And I didn't have that feeling with Rise of the Keyraken. There was, again, nothing wrong with it. It's a different type of game. But you really created this tension right away, which it's difficult to do as a game designer. So that was really neat for me to be able to look at.
Yeah, I did think the theme and win condition integration was pretty cool. Like the Keyraken was different. Like it's different than a normal Keyforge win condition, but like kill the enemy and win is so common that it didn't feel super new. Whereas, hey, this pirates trying to get away with your treasure and you have to get it back before they escape, and they could escape at any moment. That felt pretty cool. So I thought that was really nice.
Yeah, and I'm happy to hear you say that, because that was one thing I was really shooting for, was the feeling that like every turn mattered, even the early turns. And that proved to be a really difficult thing to do in a way that felt fair to the player, because you don't want them losing on the first turn necessarily, so it is difficult. I think the Keyraken adventure was really good as like an introductory adventure to this format. Like it introduces a lot of new things, like the prey keyword and sort of programming the creatures and how you reveal the enemy's cards and things. And having a lot of new mechanisms, I think would be make it really difficult. So I think the barrier to entry is a little lower with Keyraken, which is good. And I totally used the groundwork that the Keyraken laid in order to add even more new stuff and hopefully not overload the players. I know there is a lot of new stuff in my adventure.
So I guess
I think it was a crazy amount of new stuff, right? I think, yeah, you built upon it, but then you did cool stuff with like Dark Ember damaging creatures, unless they're mutants. Like I thought that was kind of a fun, cool thematic nod.
Mm-hmm.
So bring us into next was looking back with all that you've worked on. What's one thing that you're most proud of from your Keyforge adventure?
So well, first of all, just finishing it. I'm like really, really excited that I actually finished this one, because like I said, I've been interested in game design for a long time, but never actually completing a project. And this one was especially difficult too, because I did all the artwork, and that was at the point where I had almost gave up on this one. It was just really overwhelming trying to do all the art for all the cards and being not very satisfied with a lot of them. But I just set my mind on it. I'm like, all right, even if I'm not completely happy, I just need to at least finish this. So I'm proud that I finished it. I'm really happy with the way that I think the theme and mechanisms sort of like harmonize well. I feel like the new things I added, like the dark amber, the treasure chests, the wind, which affects the creatures as well as the ship's ability to escape. I think those things work with the theme really well, but they're also close enough to standard things that already exist in Keyforge where players can kind of digest them quickly, which is good. And then I'm really happy with the way that the deck kind of does something specific, kind of like how I was talking about what I like in any given Keyforge deck that I open and play is I like Keyforge decks that do something specific. And I think that in the Flight of the Royal Fortune, the adventure deck does something specific, and it scales in a way that has kind of an inevitability to it, which is important because you want a game to end at a end eventually. So I like the way that the ship feels like it's getting closer and closer to escaping. So I'm really happy with how that is baked into the design.
You mentioned, refining the deck. I mean, before you mentioned refining the rules. I'm curious, what was more difficult? Did you do one then the other? Did you have to iterate back and forth between them? How did that go?
So the basic rules I would say were, I mean, things did adjust a little bit as they go, but like the general idea was there since the beginning. Like the players win if they get all the amber out of the ship's amber pool, and the players lose if the ship successfully escapes. So that was always like the main thing to design around. And so the rules didn't change too much because, like I said, Keyforge is already a fully designed game with a lot of rules that are not going to be changed for an adventure. So the win condition and the loss condition were the major changes, I'd say. And then it's just a matter of creating cards that sort of foster that type of experience. So the cards, I didn't count, but I've gone through probably 30 different versions of this, and not like all the cards change in between every single version, but a meaningful difference happens between each version. And so there aren't very many cards that were in the original first version of the game that made it all the way to the end. Just probably a handful of them. So the cards definitely changed, and getting that balance just right, like how many copies of a specific pirate creature are you going to throw in, because sometimes you want a specific effect to appear more often than others, or maybe you want this creature to feel kind of surprising when it shows up and you haven't actually seen that one before. So yeah, those types of changes were constant. And even today, if I was to release an updated version, I already have like 2 or 3 changes I would make to cards and their wording. But
this came out like last week.
Yeah.
Right? So you're still going. Yeah.
But I think
I'm not going to, yeah.
Okay.
I'm done with it.
Yeah, I think that's part of being a game designer, is that you're always thinking and kind of looking at it. That was interesting to me to be able to hear. There's a ton of work, Mason, that's here. I mean, if anything that would separate it from the original 2 Keyforge adventures is that maybe the artwork, I can see a difference. But
right.
I'm gonna tell you 100% that if it was anyone on this podcast, we're going to give you some stick figures. And so we might even have a person arguing, well, I don't see any artwork. So I think that you do such a nice job. Like, honestly, I would not have been able to put this together because there would be no images there unless we're pulling it from Google. So, congratulations on that. I think
I'll tell you what, there were, if you would have been on the playtesting group, you would have seen those stick figures, because that's what they were for most of the time.
And I'm fine with that. The other piece that I wanted to be able to shout out, I know that we've kind of talked about the overall goal for Flight of the Royal Fortune. I think there's a couple key pieces that I want to be able to push out to anyone if you're not familiar. One, go and check it out. Please support Mason. Just go download and have some fun with it. Print and play. The Royal Fortune itself is a ship, and it's a creature. It's a mutant ship, and it says each time the Royal Fortune would take damage, it loses 1 amber instead. There is no listed power or armor, and that shows up important because it says at the end of a turn, if the Royal Fortune has no treasure chest tokens on it and no amber in its pool, players win the game. So instead of having that armor and the attack power, you're simply utilizing amber to represent that's what has to be taken. And thematically it fits, and it fits really, really well with how this card was designed. The Royal Fortune also has 2 new actions on it. And so it doesn't, part of the rules say it does not reap or fight. It just goes ahead and will either take its headwind action or its tailwind action. And so headwind is the new little wind icon, change the wind. And tailwind action, if there are more enemy pirate creatures than creatures controlled by players on your team, the Royal Fortune escapes. Your team may destroy a forged key instead. So you have this immediate response that if you don't have the 2 amber, it's going to change the wind. And if you don't have the 2 amber again, it escapes, as long as it has more creatures than you. And while that seems like it's not that big of a deal, I was sharing with Mason before in my game, a little heads up, those creatures stacked, and they stacked pretty quickly. So I found that really interesting, and it created a lot of tension. The other new card, similar to a Tide card, it's a double-sided card, and that was your headwind and tailwind. So neat little play, essentially, on what you could use with the Tide, but yet it's fitting thematically with sailing and a ship. And so headwind is the Royal Fortune cannot escape. Omni, lose 2 amber. If you do, change the wind. And tailwind, the Royal Fortune may escape. The first creature played each turn enters play ready. Omni, lose 2 amber. If you do, change the wind. So those are kind of the main ship that you're fighting against, and being able to try and steal the amber from those pirates, and the headwind or tailwind being able to interact. I thought the enemy reference card was easily laid out. So you had a nice little piece that on the enemy's turn, they're making a treasure chest. Then they're playing adventure cards from the archives and from the top of the adventure deck. The enemy battle line is used from left to right, and each enemy artifact is used and ready enemy creatures and artifacts. I will tell you that my practice game, I know kind of scrolling down, I played with my beautiful wife, so we had 2 players. We just played standard version, and it was a lot of fun. But for anyone there, they also have locations. So those locations are representing where the ship kind of starts, and they provide different benefits. So a couple of them, like the first one, just provides elusive, and I believe that was for the Royal Fortune. You have others that, and you kind of also randomize it depending on how many players you're going to add in a certain amount of cards. So some of those are unseen, which it's a really nice component for board games and card games to have some hidden information. You don't know what you're going to face.
Mm-hmm. And with the locations too, the last location is always called the final stretch.
Yep.
And what it does when it's revealed is it causes the ship to be able to escape. Yeah, be able to escape way more easily. So players will lose the game. They won't necessarily lose the game right away, but it's going to be a lot more difficult to not lose the game, basically, once you get to the last location. So the location deck allows the game to scale with the amount of players, basically.
I know that you talked about creatures. I found a lot of the creatures seem to be coming in pairs of 2 when I was looking at it. I don't know if that was just a number that you settled upon. And then the actions, some of these actions were absolutely brutal to be able to face. And so it was really interesting how it cycled the deck back around for you to face those same creatures again and again, or how it's being able to break down the amber. Amber, one of the cool pieces you had talked about, or I think you talked about, if not, The Dark Amber Shard that's there. So being able to play on the AoE shard piece, a little bit of the history. Dark Amber Shard enters play under your control. Play, archive an adventure card. Omni, gain 1 amber and draw a card. So you're looking at that. You also had, what was the one? There's another card that basically gave an amber to you as the player. And every time you're taking,
cannon?
yeah, and so the Dark Amber Cannon is what I faced, and that Dark Amber Cannon was vicious because every time you take an amber, Dark Amber, then you're basically damaging any of your creatures that are not mutants. So
I thought that was pretty cool because like you want the amber, right? But you don't want all your dudes to get damaged. So I thought that was really interesting.
Yeah,
I think
the Dark Amber created a lot of interesting types of designs I could go with, and I had a lot of fun doing that. But yeah, like the Dark Amber Cannon, like you said, it helps you because the ship is losing 1 amber each turn, which is actively moving you towards winning the game. But at the same time, it's wiping out your battle line, and you need your battle line because if there are more pirates than you have creatures, then the ship is going to escape and you'll lose that way. So it's a good tension there between getting a benefit and also messing up your plans.
Dark Amber Cannon in our game came out very early too, which was that was pretty brutal. So looking at next question, you said you've kind of been into board games. As someone who's also been into board games for quite a while, is there any other game outside of Keyforge that inspired you while you were going ahead and making Flight of the Royal Fortune?
Oh, that's a good question. I can't think of any that directly inspired it. I don't know. That's a really good question. I was playing a pirate game around the time I was working on this. I'm forgetting the name of it. It's on Board Game Arena. Yeah, I can't remember. Mostly it would have just been a thematic kind of inspiration. Yeah,
Have you designed a co-op game before?
No, I hadn't. And that was really fun with this one too. I think with co-ops, there's challenges that come with it, but there's also, it's almost easier in some ways, I think, because the players to some extent they have to take some responsibility in their gameplay experience. Like if you bring your 100 SAS deck and play on, easy mode, then you can't really complain about the experience you had. So like if somebody thinks it's too hard, well, I mean, you just have to bring a better deck or lower the difficulty. So you kind of get away with a little bit of that. That being said, I do think the difficulty is appropriate. If not, sorry to say this, JR, but I do think, if anything, I think it's a little bit easier than I would want. But maybe it's just because I've played it 100 times and I kind of know how it works. So.
And as a disclosure, I know we're not into gameplay, kind of what was there. Both my wife and I ended up sitting down. I grabbed the second deck that I ever opened. So both of these were Coda decks. Both of them are not great by any means. One came out as a 64 SAS. The other was a 65 SAS. To give you an idea, we have Heat Tanker, Theater Patron. And this one comes across with logos Sanctum and Shadows. It had a triple Dexter. Double Titan mechanic. So yeah, we'll stop right there because Sheep was already harassing me earlier but that's the second deck I had. And I'm like, I haven't played it for ages. And I'm like, you know what? Why not? And I actually brought it out because my wife brought her favorite deck, which is Mage Dutch Offidus and Sanctum Shadows and Untamed. That one had a little bit more ability and kind of what was going on. Full Moon Key Charge, Double Witch of the Eye. I will actually say that together between these, there were 3 cleansing waves. And so that actually provided quite a bit of amber generation when facing it. But they're also Coda decks. And, my deck, Heat Tanker, had 14 creatures in Coda. And that would be one of the pieces coming back if you wanted to, I guess, miss out on cover those ears for anyone who's not interested. But I would probably, I want to definitely see what the impact is with or Worlds Collide, where I just have more creatures, because I think that would be a much easier battle versus what I was facing. What I was facing was just uphill. Dark Amber Cannon came out almost immediately, and it was with limited creatures and the need to recur. It was causing problems because we couldn't keep creatures out on the board. And if we couldn't keep creatures out on the board, you're basically spending the little bit of amber that you're gaining each turn in order to just make it so the ship isn't able to sail away quickly. So I loved it, but that's where the fun is, you have 100 reps with it. You have a lot more experience. There's a lot of play experience that I could see coming out of this and being able to try out different decks and see, hey, what can work and what can't.
Yeah. And that's the beauty of Keyforge too. Like, the possibilities are endless with the decks, and with so many sets being released, it's like you're never going to be able to design an adventure that addresses every single deck in Keyforge. And that's what's really cool and gives it a lot of replayability, any of the adventures, I'd say. Plus, with the fact that the win condition is different, different decks, even if they are not competitively viable, can be really good against the adventure. And creatures are important, but it really depends on your deck. Like, I've beaten it on the hardest difficulty with an 11 creature deck, which was really fun. It just depends on the makeup of the deck, and also how the cards come out. There's a lot of I do think that any given game of Flight of the Royal Fortune can be definitely different than another one. There's enough consistency to make the deck always do what it's supposed to do to beat you, but there's a lot of variance in terms of the way cards can come out. But yeah, definitely different sets make it easier. Obviously, Mass Mutation is, I would say, the best against it. So if you want to if you want a quick win, just grab your 20 mutant deck and go to town. But
if anyone has a 20 mutant deck at Dav, please go ahead and message Ewok Jr.
Couple of Vault's blessings in there for good measure.
Yeah. One of the questions that was on here that I was really curious about, you're talking about playing different games, playtesting. How did you try it out with different decks? Did you play against each of the sets? Did you go ahead? I mean, you said you had 100 different reps here. You did put it out with some play testers, but how did you go ahead and make sure that there weren't major glaring holes before it was kind of sent out to the general public?
Yeah, so before I got my first round of playtesting with other players, I played the crap out of this game through the first, it must have been 15 versions at least before I had anybody else play it, I think. And I have a large Keyforge collection, like I'm sure anybody listening does. So I had decks from all sorts of different sets, and I wanted to try different things. Like, okay, let's see how Coda Steel is doing. Let's see how a big, beefy Brobnar Sanctum board is going to do. So you just test all the different iterations and then see, like, are some things... Like I said, not all decks are going to be just as bad or just as good against it. So it's just seeing, like, is it too easy with the Brobnar Sanctum guys, So yeah, I just played the crap out of it, and then got other people to look at it, and then saw more mistakes, and then just keep iterating and iterating.
Did you purposely try to use either particularly strong, like Vault Tour level decks, or were you like, if you're going to bring that, you have to play in the hardest difficulty. I'm not going to overly focus on that, or did you want to also give like the super strong decks that need, a certain experience?
Well, so unfortunately, I don't own any like Vault Tour level decks, I'd say. I played my best decks against it and found a good enough challenge. I think that on the most difficult version, there would still be enough of a challenge there in order to make it fun. But any listeners out there, feel free to put that theory to the test. I did have a guy who played it recently. He brought his like high 80s deck, and I think he won with it just barely on the hardest difficulty. So that was a good sign. I was happy to hear that. Yeah, I think for me personally, I really like playing lower SAS decks. So I was not shy throwing those at it. And the thing that I enjoy most about this adventure is that the SAS almost doesn't matter because, SAS is designed around competitive Keyforge. And so things like amber generation, amber control, like all those things are important in this adventure as well. But I wouldn't say that they're directly equivalent. So the SAS, I mean, if you've got great cards in your deck's probably great in any situation. But if you're going to play this adventure, I wouldn't count out any of your weaker decks. Like if you have a deck that you never play in competitive, but you really enjoy it, which I have a bunch of those, then I think that my adventure or the official adventures, like those are great places to play those decks.
Reversal deck, here we come. All right. So
did you actually go to the bottom of the pile, like to find like, well, what if I purposely bring a real terrible deck just to see what'll happen, or was that too stinky?
I didn't bring any, quintuple alpha decks against.
No,
it,
okay,
but...
okay.
You didn't bring triple Dexter, which will cycle back to you. So
I did not bring that, but
that's how degenerate we are. We're good with this. So did you run into any struggles while you were developing the actual game? So whether that was from rules or from cards itself?
Yeah.
Do you want to share any of that?
Oh, for sure. Yeah. So I think the initial problem, I mean, I won't even go through the things that I was able to solve on my own before introducing playtesters because, like, I mean, designing on a personal level and just testing it yourself, like, it's okay if there's like some really bad mistakes because you just fix them right away and then, find out the real problems later on that you can't see yourself. And so the main issue I had when I finally put it in front of other people was the ship was it was really good at not letting you win, but also really good at not winning itself. So it would just like make amber, which is the exact opposite of the feeling you want the game to have. Like you want the players to feel like, oh, we're making progress. And you want it to feel like the ship, oh no, it's getting closer to escaping. So it wasn't doing that at all. It was just like actively stalling the game out for as long as possible. And that was terrible. So that got fixed. That was an important thing to change. So now the pace is very different.
So what did you end up changing on the ship then to allow to move the game forward?
So it was a combination of slightly tweaking probably the parameters of like how many creatures were coming out for the ship, because that's the primary way that the ship escapes is by having more pirate creatures than you have creatures. But it was also changing the rate at which the ship is gaining amber, because you want the ship to get some amber along the way, so that way you're not having too easy of a time of beating it. But I was really excited about putting like dark amber bonus icons on a lot of the cards, which was cool because you'd add a dark amber and then it was like, ooh, we're using this cool new mechanism. But it just wasn't contributing to the feeling that I wanted the game to have. And it made it feel like you weren't able to make progress against the ship. So there were things like that. I also added a few cards or changed the way some cards worked, where there's one card, Salty Hoarder, and when he comes into play, he actually breaks one of the treasure chests to release some dark amber, and then he captures it from the ship onto himself. So he's kind of like, he's like really, he likes the dark amber so much that he kind of steals it from the ship, which in the earlier version of the game, it was just Exalt Salty Hoarder with 2 dark amber, which had the same effect. Like, you can, once you kill him, like you're going to gain that dark amber, which, like we said, has some positive effects for you and some negative effects. But it wasn't bringing you closer to winning the game. And so now the way he plays is it actively helps the player get a little closer to winning, which feels a little better. There's also another creature called Nosy Swabber, where when you destroy him, it breaks a treasure chest. So that allows players to make progress and also time certain cards that are like scaling amber control, so you can force the ship to have a bunch of amber in its pool. But yeah.
Yeah, I was going to go ahead and read. So Salty Hoarder, 6 power, 0 armor, pirate mutant creature, taunt, prey, the least powerful creature, and then play break a treasure chest. Then Salty Hoarder captures 2 from the Royal Fortunes pool. What's interesting is even if you kill it, then it also brings in that amber that if you're not playing with mutants is going to go ahead and damage them. And then the other character or creature you said was Nosy Swabber. So 3 power, 0 armor, pirates, destroyed, break a treasure chest. And, when you break a treasure chest, remove a treasure chest token. If you do, add 6 to the Royal Fortunes pool. And you even added a little spice here. I'll just tidy up over here. So I like those little pieces. You're trying to be able to follow with what the game designers have, it was really well done in that regard. I know that Draskar, we got a couple other pieces. I was going to bounce into gameplay experience unless you wanted to tackle any dying questions from the audience or from what you want to go ahead and say.
Well, so I did have one more just based on the playtesting thing that was bouncing around in my head, and I guess you don't have to maybe describe in detail, but I am sort of curious if, as you're going through and you're trying to balance, if you found a particular type of deck that was like that type of deck was too strong and you had to change the game because the big Saurian board was just too good against the game.
Yeah, so funnily enough, the the first type of deck that I encountered that was too good was actually AOA with Sanctum and Brobnar.
Really?
Yeah, because and this was a much earlier version of the game. So but anyway, the issue was in AOA there were so many fighting combo effects that could pop off, like the double Grey Rider Gangernaut combo. And when the ship loses an amber if you attack it. And so it was real easy to just high roll your double Grey Rider, fairly early, and then just keep running into the ship. And to some extent that can still happen, but I've implemented a lot more things that make it less OP, I guess. So there are things like you start the game with the ship having an elusive, which makes fighting a little less effective at the start of the adventure. There's more taunts that enter play immediately next to the ship. So once those come out, then you have to get through those bigger creatures before you can fight the ship. There's an upgrade that gives the ship hazardous. So there's things like that to try and mitigate that to some extent. But like I said, you're not going to make all decks just as powerful against it. So there's going to be things like that. But yeah, the AOA decks were surprising. Also, I mean, like I said, is just pretty good against it, which I think is okay. Like, it's part of the theme. Like, mutants should be good against the ship in this adventure. And like I said, players can tailor the experience to make it more fun.
So you were talking about Foggy Harbor. I like that. That was one of the locations that you actually start the game with. The Royal Fortune gains elusive. So interesting, those little tweaks to just make it consistent and a little bit more competitive. I guess I'll go in, if we're okay, into some gameplay experience. Now, this is limited. It was not 100 plays by any means, and I'd like to see more. I shared the 2 decks that I had. So 2 coda decks that, frankly, are very we have 16 creatures and 14 creatures. One of the early observations that I found is that, we did not play every rule 100%. And I say that just because we were going for it. But even as you're coming back, you're like, oh, I think I messed that up. And so there were a couple questions I was asking. One of those just being, okay, when the creatures for the Royal Fortune go ahead and reap, do you collect regular amber or dark amber? And it was just something that I had obviously missed in the rules. It was regular amber, but that has an impact, obviously, if you're playing Coda, because if it's dark amber, you're taking damage on your creatures all the time for anything that's captured or stolen. But Sanctum really, really stood out to me as their armor actually prevented quite a bit of the damage that was there. Also, some of the creatures, again, and this I saw in Keyraken, where if you have elusive, you can go ahead and you're running into elusive. I thought that your version here with the Royal Fortune did a much better job at being able to have damage with, skirmish, so your creatures aren't just dying. I thought that you had some nice warding ability in there. I thought that you went ahead and actually allowed the pirates to be able to work together. And once they can flood a board, that is an extremely dangerous piece. There was, and I forget what the actual card was, but there was one of the actions, Davy Jones' Locker, Omega. After you play this card and this step, destroy each creature, then shuffle each pirate creature from the adventure discard pile into the adventure deck. So nice ways to be able to cycle those cards and to be able to bring the creatures back. So the big takeaway for me was that Cleansing Wave and Sanctum as a whole with armor actually really played very well in this. And I was appreciative to have that in kind of the games that I was running through. And I say Cleansing Wave because once you did break through, those creatures could actually last a little bit longer. But Cleansing Wave had a big amber generation, which was really nice. Did you see Sanctum playing a larger part than in a lot of competitive games when you were running through playing? Or was that just because I had a limited play experience?
No, you definitely hit on one of the stronger houses, I'd say. Yeah, the armor really helps with a lot of the dinky damage you take from the Dark Amber. And just being able to keep creatures on the board is really important in order to prevent the ship from getting away. So yeah, Sanctum is really good, especially, like I said, in AoA. And in MM, there's a lot of good fight effects too, or a Bulwark in MM who gives Assault. That's super good against ship. Then you're fighting to make it lose 2. So yeah, Sanctum is for sure a very strong house.
I will say one of the big pieces that I missed was on Tailwind for the wind. The first creature played each turn enters play ready. And that would be huge to acknowledge and just kind of point out because we were not playing that. And so almost every turn we would pay the 2 amber in order to be able to switch it to a headwind. And then the Royal Fortune would turn it back, but we were not utilizing that ability that our first creature it enters play. And again, that's just, it was right there. That was a clear mistake that we had missed. So, my hands raised as an omission there, but that's something where I think we go back and be able to see it because nothing was coming in ready. And I'm like, man, we're really struggling to gain amber here. And we're returning basically 2 over every single turn.
Mm-hmm.
So that was interesting to me, and to be able to play. I felt that some of the creatures were definitely stronger than others. I'm trying to think of where was the little Stowaway Brooks was an interesting creature. So Stowaway Brooks was the 1 power 3 armor pirate mutant elusive. Stowaway Brooks enters play under your control, and can be used as if it belongs to the active house. Each dark amber that would be added to your pool is captured by Stowaway. Trying to think of. So there are just some interesting cards here when you get a chance to be able to impact and kind of move that amber onto your side, but also the creatures. I will say Neutron Shark for me worked exceptionally well. It's a phenomenal card as a whole, but to be able to have an impact and take out creatures and then to be also able to take out key artifacts. That's the only reason that I felt that I was able to stay in the game as long as I could. I also have seen a little bit of feedback in regards to not wanting to forge right away, which is an interesting piece. Because there are a couple different mechanics that are built in that as soon as you forge, you're pulling back more creatures that are being added, or kind of more negative aspects. And once you get to 3 keys forged, it's not that a matter of you win the game. So there's some interesting strategy that's a little bit deeper, that I'm honestly curious to investigate and to be able to try out a couple different decks with it.
Yeah, so with the keys, one of the early design choices I made, which I was excited about, is that if ever you're about to lose the game because the ship escapes, you can instead prevent it from happening by destroying one of the keys that you have already forged. So they act as like a little safety mechanism in that way. And you're right, the game does scale a little bit with the amount of keys you have forged already. So, yeah, being able to, like you said, on a deeper strategy level, if you're playing on a hard difficulty, not over committing on the keys could be a good tactic. At the same time, though, if something happens and you need that key in order to prevent the ship from escaping, then it's nice to be able to have at least one key available to do that. So, yeah.
Do you, from your playtesting, is it common, sure, that you're basically utilizing or burning 2 amber every turn in order to go ahead and turn the wind?
So it's if you can, it's a good idea, because when there's a headwind, the ship is not going to be able to escape. And then it's going to change it back to a tailwind, which gives you the benefit of having your creatures enter play, or your first creature enter play ready. So it is common to do that, yeah. But it's not, if you don't do it, you're playing a little bit risky, because you don't know how many pirates are going to come out, and if you haven't thought through the enemy's turn to see if they're going to kill any of your creatures. Plus, when there's a tailwind, the first creature that the ship plays enters play ready as well. So that is another factor. So yeah, generally having the ship with a headwind is going to help you. It's going to make it harder for the ship, as it would if a ship was trying to sail away.
Now, I know we can't go ahead and look at Winds of Exchange. It's interesting that you talked about strong decks coming from AOA with Brobnar and Sanctum, but we'd actually have the ability to have Brobnar, Sanctum, and Saurian in Winds of Exchange. So do you imagine that there might be some things that you might have to tweak or change? Or even just looking at those 3 houses, it just might be, hey, it's a different game. And again, it's part of your play experience, what you make of it.
Yeah, definitely in the second camp there. I don't think I'll be tweaking the game anymore. Like even like I said, I do have a couple ideas for things that I would modify slightly, in order to, if anything, just make it a little more clear for the players. But they're not changes that actually would amount to much. And so I'm comfortable just putting a bow on this and being done with this adventure. Yeah. And right now my main focus is just getting as many people as possible to play this, and then to give me feedback too, because that's the main thing for me. Is I'm really, really interested in game design, and getting positive feedback about what I'm doing right. And if there's any criticisms, I'd love to hear those too, because that's the only way to improve.
I think overall, the main piece that really stood out, I mean, if we want to talk about how elegant the game was put together, you're looking at the rules. They match FFG. If I hadn't known that it was coming from you ahead of time, like I could argue that this was an FFG piece. It read pretty clearly, if not very, very clearly. I thought even the cover, it was well designed and well laid out. And so that was really neat to be able to see the utilization of, bolded text, italicized piece, just so that here's what's happening, here's the main objective. The pitchers also went ahead and matched it. So I give you true kudos for that, because it was a nice mix of some graphics plus words. And there was some playfulness. I mean, even in the design for the rules, you have little text there that, you shouldn't need a telescope to find the location deck. Put it somewhere easy to see. So you're being playful with it, which I've seen in a couple different rule books as someone who is inevitably the one reading through rules that when we're looking at board games. So that's fun. And it's another way to be able to grab people's attention and kind of pull them in. I think Dungeon Lords was the first rule book that I remember seeing that had that same entity where it's kind of playful back and forth. So I would definitely keep that. I thought that it was easy to be able to follow for setup and kind of what the Royal Fortune is, the Royal Fortune deck. I thought that the newest implementation where you actually showcase the Dark Amber and kind of what was there, that was awesome. I really enjoyed that. So I think overall it was good. The only, if I had one little piece of feedback criticism that was there is for Tara and I, the team play, the idea of making sure that it, how are the cards interacting with one another? And you do spell it out that I can put my my upgrades on Tara. You should have 2 separate amber pools is my understanding for what's there, but I don't know how to be able to make it clear. And so that's where it's I don't know what more can be done. But that was the only piece where you have to understand that competitive, the cooperative play and what's happening. So the creatures are there. They are separate entities. It's not that if you share a house of Sanctum that I'm able to use any of the creatures. They're still separate. But you can go ahead and utilize the upgrades on other creatures. That was my understanding from Keyraken, and that's my understanding here. Is that correct?
Yeah, so that team play section of the rulebook is directly a copy of what was in the Keyraken.
Yeah.
So a lot of things like the team play and the prey keyword, none of that has changed. And yeah, those are new things that are completely different from a standard game of Keyforge to some extent. So yeah, they are a little difficult, and yeah, definitely take your point that those could be cleared up a little bit.
And again, that was the same piece that I had with FFG. It's a difficult concept because you're so used to playing Keyforge in one way. Again, when I went through it with Sheep, we've played so many games, it felt very intuitive. But I think Keyforge Adventures is a phenomenal way to introduce new players to the game of Keyforge. Here's some concepts. We're going to play together and we're going to try and beat this cooperatively. So being able to work through that concept is an awesome way to introduce people. And I've used it to some success. So I like it. It wasn't necessarily clear. Again, my wife had played with Coda, but once AOA came out, she really kind of moved on. It wasn't as interesting for her, and that's fine. But that's a concept then that was kind of foreign or difficult. It wasn't as easy as me trying to pick it up. And I'm trying to explain it to her, but I'm not the best at being able to explain things. So I understand that. Outside of that though, Mason, I think that everything, it was beautifully outlined. It was easy to be able to read and to be able to see. And I think that this is a game that you should be really extremely proud of. It's enough that I could hand someone who's played Keyforge and they should be able to easily walk away and have endless hours of fun.
Thank you. That's good to hear.
Yeah, no, I've not played it yet, but I will tell you, while we were sitting here, I did order it from Aegis, so it is on the way. I've also, just based on what I've been hearing, I've been looking through some of my decks. I think I'm going to bring some Sanctum. I think just when I was reading the rules, I think it seems like Stun and Exhaust is maybe really good. Save yourself a key if you can stun the ship. So,
yes.
So I got some Burning Glares. I got some Mutants. Got some Skippy Time Hogs here. I think I'm going to try this deck here with some Great Riders, Spirit Way. Yeah, this might be my first attempt here with this.
Nice. Yeah, you're hitting on some good strategies already. I like that.
Draz, you're going with actual strategies, okay? Not a triple Dexter deck and triple Dexter, some some Halo Blaster. I mean, but again, this is some of those decks that you just don't bring out because they're not going to see the light of day. They were okay. It was my second deck. You didn't have another deck because of the shortage at the time. But I think that's where Keyforge Adventures really shines. It allows us to be able to bring in new players, and it also allows us to be able to revisit. You were talking about fun. I think that playing solo against my one of my reversal decks is kind of where I'm looking at being able to take it. But I also want to, I want to personally try it with some higher SAS. So when I say that, some decks like Drazgor, where they're a little bit more aligned, I did see the aspect of stun is really, really important. Blinding Light from Sanctum again did come out. That was a very, very nice card that I really appreciated being able to see.
Yeah, stun can be very good. That's smart of you guys to hit on that strategy. Exhaust too with Dark Tidings. Dark Tidings definitely has its own feel against the too with all the exhausting.
Yeah, I could see that. See that be real good. Right.
Well, I know that we have been talking your ear off for a long time. I want to thank you for coming on and taking time to share your experience kind of creating this amazing Keyforge adventure, but also just so people can get an idea. Flight of the Royal Fortune, it is out. It follows after FFG's style, but again, it's its own entity, and it is a blast to play. Glad that we could get a little support for Aegis there. I appreciate them supporting you. What else would you like to go ahead and tell our audience there, Mr. Mason?
Well, first of all, just to thank all my playtesters that I had again. Everybody listed in the credits was very, very helpful to me. It's impossible to get enough playtesting on your own in order to design a game. So really appreciate that. And shout out to there was one guy who played it at Keyforge Live, and I didn't catch his name, so I wasn't able to put him in the credits. But if you're listening, forget your name, but thank you to you specifically. Yeah, there were a lot of people who helped me out. Really appreciate all that. And then basically, if anybody decides to play it, like I said before, I really, really would love to hear your feedback and what you thought, what kind of deck you played, and how it turned out. I'd love to hear that. And then finally, if anybody is interested in making more things like this, I do have some more ideas for what my next game design project might be, and it might be another Keyforge adventure. But I don't think I will tackle another one without the help of some other people. I'd rather do this more on a team rather than just being a solo designer. So if you're interested in that, definitely hit me up on Discord or shoot me an email. And yeah, I'd love to make another adventure, but it's a lot of work, so I could use all the help I could get.
All right, so you kind of touched on the question that I had there was, what do you want to do next? Could you go ahead and list an email or Discord, and then we can try and link it in the show notes as well, and we'll kind of finish there. Yeah,
so on Discord, I'm MMLEHTO number 9469. And then if you want to shoot me an email, it's mmlehto@gmail.com.
Perfect. Well, I appreciate, Mason, that you, put a ton of time. I know this was time away from the family, your work, other pieces. Hopefully you had a blast with it because it is already bringing joy to myself and I know many others out there. Another shout out to FFG for being able to put together Keyforge Adventures so that we have something to do during the pandemic. And for the greater community, if and when you get a chance to be able to play it, please reach out to Mason, let him know. And hopefully there's some other people who will join you and we'll see future products from you in the future to be able to see other Keyforge Adventures because this is absolutely amazing. So you did a great job, Mason.
Thank you.
Draz, do you have anything else that you want to say? Otherwise, you get the last words, my friend.
Everybody come join us on the Discord. We play Sealed on Tuesdays and Wednesdays. We play Archon on Sundays. It's a lot of fun. Come on out. Mason, you should join us, actually. It's a lot of fun. And it's a good group of guys and gals that get together, have a good time, joke around, play some games. So I encourage everybody to come join us and play some Keyforge.
Sounds good. Everyone stay safe and have fun forging those keys and going ahead and stealing dark amber from some pirates. Have a good night.
Happy forging, everyone.